So look, last week we were talking about Oberon-class submarines and how good we are with submarines. Well, how good we should be with submarines.
Yeah, strangely, we're not that good.
Well, we are. I mean,
We just don't have them.
Remember I mentioned last week there was the mini sub in the War Memorial. You know how, have you been to see it lately?
No, I mean, when was the last time I went to Canberra? Gosh.
Yeah,
you're not
going to confess to that at any time soon.
Yep.
Well, you see it now, and it's in the big back annex, and it's this beautiful display. When I was a kid, it was sitting outside in a couple of concrete blocks, and we used to climb all over it. Right? Seriously, you could crawl all over this thing, and this massive thing held two guys and managed to sink a couple of ships in Sydney Harbour. Submarines are a really, really effective weapon. The problem with submarines is they're really freaking expensive to build.
Yeah, they would be.
So when Australia announced that they were going to create these new submarines with France, everyone was like going, oh, geez, I don't know. And then, of course, Scott Morrison bounces up at 7 o'clock in the morning and announces AUKUS, I like to call it.
AUKUS.
Yeah, AUKUS. I just call it AUKUS, mate, because it's totally AUKUS. It's really, really awkward what's happened. In one fell swoop, Scott Morrison has literally sunk our submarine program and pretty much our diplomatic relationship with most of the world. You want to talk about it?
Do I?
This is going to be great.
You're listening to I Spied, the past its use-by date submarine of Australian intelligence.
Oh, no, it's still good. It'll last. It's good.
Are you sure about that?
Oh, it really is a bit rank, but you know what? We'll make do.
We have to.
That's all we've got.
Hello, I'm Michelle Stevenson and I'm here with David Callan, and this ep we're going to talk about kind of something that was announced out of left field and took the world, well, Australians by storm. It was pretty much ado about nothing, some would say. It's AUKUS.
AUKUS, the Australian United Kingdom, United States something announcement. See, that was the thing. There's no treaty. There's no contract.
No.
There's not a lot of it. It was like almost like Biden and Johnson went, oh, God, let's make an announcement to keep this idiot happy.
Well, I mean, to be honest, we do know what this was really about, and it was about China.
Well, it's about China, but let's break this down into portions here, right? First and foremost is we're going to get some new submarines. According to Scott Morrison, we're going to get some new submarines, only we're not exactly sure what kind of submarines we're going to get. They're going to be nuclear, which is strange because we don't have a nuclear industry to support them, but they're going to be nuclear, but we're not sure what kind of nuclear, and we're not sure when we're going to get them or how much they're going to cost. But that's okay because now we're friends with America and the UK again, despite the fact that France, Germany, Malaysia, Indonesia, China, pretty much everyone else on the planet kind of hates us at the moment. So it's an absolute train wreck of an idea.
But let's be honest. The deal with France was kind of not a very good deal to begin with. There was delays on delays on delays. It was going over budget. We were paying the money. We weren't getting very far. And now apparently we are going to get nuclear-powered subs delivered around the same time as the diesel ones were about to.
Okay, now let me correct a few things there. The French subs that we're going to get are called short fin barracudas. They were nuclear submarines that the Australians insisted had to be conventional diesel electric.
Oh, there you go.
So that was one. We bespoke them to create a submarine that wasn't the right kind of submarine that we were building. The other thing about it is they started building their own in 2007, and they're French were building their own in 2007. They was meant to be commissioned. The first one was commissioned in 2020. The target was 2007, and it will be fully operational this year, hopefully. That's the first one the French are building without any of the bespoke stuff that the Australians demanded for. So it's 14 years from the drawing board to the ocean, and we have to go back to the drawing board with these ones. We had to. It built by the Naval Group. It was being built kind of in Adelaide, though nothing was being done. So that was it. Now, the first one that we were going to get from the French was meant to go into construction in 2023. So there was no reason for anything to be built yet. That wasn't part of the plan. So the whole idea that the French were dicking around, kind of true, but they were kind of they were on target for what they were meant to do. So essentially Australia's turned around and said, right, we're going to adopt that and move on to a UK or US sub, and we don't know what kind. Now, here's the thing about the US and the UK subs. US subs, the choices would be the Virginia class. Probably not. The Virginia class, it's an older sub. The Seawolf, that's an older sub, or the Los Angeles. They're all attack class submarines, and that's what we'd probably get as an attack class. Because the other one is the Ohio, which is a ship-submersible ballistic nuclear sub. Essentially, it's a missile platform that floats around in the ocean. So that's the US subs. The UK subs, well, they were a punk rock band from 1976 who had a huge hit with a song called Emotional Blackmail. And I think that's kind of close to what's going on. I actually think that what's going on here is I think Biden and Johnson are doing an end run around Scott Morrison to get him on board with climate change. But we'll talk about that in a sec. What the Brits have are the Trafalgar class, which is an attack, or they call them fleet subs, but that's an attack sub, and then the Astute class. And the Astute class is another ship-submersible ballistic nuclear platform. So that's what they've got. The problem is they've got massive problems with their submarines. At the moment, the Astute class, they've got 2 that have not been on the water for the last 3 years because they have to refit them. The Americans have massive problems with their maintenance. They've lied to Congress about it to keep the Los Angeles class submarines literally afloat. But a lot of their stuff is not in operation and their shipyards are below par for maintenance. Now, here's where it becomes a problem for Australia. If we give the US or the UK our money to build our subs, how do we maintain them? We have to send them to the UK or the US. Now, one of the things they talk about with these new nuclear subs that we're going to get is the technology we get is the reactor is a capsule. It's modular. It literally comes in one big piece and you put it in, you never have to refuel it. It's a 50-year refueling, to refuel it is 50 years. And by then the reactor is dead in the water and you get rid of it. You then have to dispose of it thoughtfully, e.g.
And we know they will not. But my question is, there's this whole other thing about where are we berthing it? Where are we docking them? Because we don't really even have the capabilities to do that. We
can't put them in Fremantle because that's a nuclear-free port. We can't put them in Melbourne. I don't think Melbourne will accept them. Sydney will take anyone. I mean, Sydney, where the Golden Harbour will take. And interestingly enough, we've had nuclear-powered ships. The Americans have brought nuclear-powered ships into our harbour.
Yeah. I don't have an issue with that. Look, we all understand, and anyone who has a little bit of intellect understands that nuclear-powered does not mean nuclear.
Yes and no.
It's not going to blow up or melt down.
Yes or no? There was a major problem with one of the UK ships. They didn't tell anyone about this for 2 years, but they had a major reactor malfunction on one of their Astute class submarines back in 2010 or something. And it was like, don't tell Parliament.
Yes, but also 2010, that's like 11 years ago, 12 years ago. Like that's a very long time ago. Yeah,
a very long time ago. Now, let's not forget as well, we don't have a nuclear industry in Australia.
Well, we should. We probably soon will, and we probably should.
Again, that's another reason why this could be happening. It could be pushing us towards a nuclear thing. Only problem is the Labor Party have turned around and said, we don't want this. Now, there was a really interesting point made by somebody, I think he used to be the head of the Australian Submarine Company or Australian Submarine Corp. The guys basically has turned around and said this is probably the most politicised thing in Australia.
Right.
The Collins-class submarine, a lot of people have problems with the Collins-class submarine. Everyone talks about how noisy they are, which is... They are. Well, to begin with, they were a very noisy sub. One, there was a problem with the shape that made lots of noise. Water flowing over the body of the sub underwater made a lot of noise. And the other problem was the engine was a bit noisy. Do you know how they fixed it?
I don't know. Muffled it?
Well, to fix the problem with the hydrofoiling, with cavitation it's called, is the sound of the water passing over the surface, they added a few bits of flaring and just made out of fiberglass or carbon fibre. Basically,
Did you really spend the last week learning all about submarines? Because that's what I hear. I've done. This is what I hear. You went deep with this one, didn't you? And no pun intended.
Yeah. Oh, I am dust boot at the bottom, right? The pressure on my blanket fort, it's crushing. You can hear the blankets pinging is the pressure.
Oh my God, you were saying words and stuff and things. Like, honestly.
Now, the thing is, so they put all this stuff. So essentially what Australia did to its Collins-class submarine to make it stop making noise under the water was they put a spoiler on it. How Aussie is that? We totally boganed up our sub. The other thing they realised was the engine was making a bit of noise. Now, the way they fixed the engine noise is they used what are called anechoic tiles.
Okay.
Anechoic tiles. So essentially, they built a blanket fort around the engine.
So you were onto something.
They put tiling in there, these specially designed tiles to absorb the sound. Okay. Now, the thing is, with a Collins-class submarine, they're actually a really good sub. Now that they've fixed all the problems, they had problems with the combat system, they had problems with the engine, with everything. But it's a brand new sub. It was a bespoke sub based on a Swedish sub called a Västergötland. It was based on this sub, but whenever you change something, you change its profile. Now, once they fixed all the problems, the Australian sub was brilliant. It went up against a Los Angeles-class attack submarine in an exercise and kicked its ass. And in another exercise, it got inside the defence loop of a major US fleet and sunk like 3 ships before it was destroyed itself. This was an exceptionally effective weapons platform. The problem is it's old. Right. And it has no range. And if we are to be expected to sit at the bottom of a sea that would be possibly south of China, we need something that lasts. Because a Collins-class submarine can last for about 9,000 nautical miles on the surface and can only stay underwater for about 400 nautical miles before it needs to surface to recharge its batteries with its diesel engines. An atomic submarine, a nuclear submarine, can stay underwater indefinitely. Of course, it's going to drive your crew freaking crazy.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with a nuclear submarine is they're a lot bigger. So your onshore stuff gets to be more complicated. And look, there is a lot of stuff submarines can do. You can use them to throw like special forces in for very clandestine covert operations. In fact, the Collins-class submarine has berths for 12 passengers. I just did air quotes for no reason.
I don't know why you're doing that.
Right. So these passengers are generally Navy clearance divers, which are effectively the SAS on water.
Yeah.
Right? They're special forces. So these Collins-class submarines are good. Now, the problem we have is because we've broken the contract with the French, we need to make these things last. Now, there's a major problem with making our Collins-class submarines last. Can you imagine what that might be?
Maintenance?
Yeah. Do you know what the problem with the maintenance is?
They don't make stuff like that anymore?
Not quite. The gearbox and the electrical generator are both French made.
Oh, so we've really pissed them off, haven't we?
So,
I don't and also it's cost us so much money to break this contract. I just don't understand the whole idea behind it.
Essentially, it works like this. Australia really, really wants to align itself with the United States and UK.
It wants to be part of a secret club. That's what it wants.
It wants to be part of a secret club.
It does.
And I think there are a couple of factors. One, the United States wants more access to Northern Australia for its military. It wants to be able to send planes and troops and park its ships in Northern Australia, particularly if China is heating up.
100%.
Right, so there's the China thing. There's a China angle that's really, really important. The other thing as well is the UK desperately want to have some relevance on the world stage. Since they left the European Union, they're kind of irrelevant. Yeah. They have a fairly decent-sized navy. I mean, they're a very effective navy, but, I mean, really, everyone goes, England. Yeah, okay, whatever.
I mean, they used to be a superpower. But when we look at China specifically, I don't understand why we are so bent on pissing them off, essentially. Like the way I view China, they are soft flex. They are taking over the world, with a kind of a soft flex nature by the economy and
it's economics. Yeah, it's not military.
Yeah, it's economics. Like they buy. I mean, for example, they go to like Fiji and they fund all the roads, like infrastructure and everything like that. That is how they're overcoming. That is how they're spreading their wings. So I don't understand why we need to then flex militarily.
Well, how else do you flex? What else can Australia do to flex? Do we turn around and say,
why do we
you
even
can't
need
have
to
our-"
flex? Why?
Well, here's the thing. At the moment, we have a government that's rife with scandals. It's got scandals coming up the wazoo. It's had a very, very poor figures coming out of the back end of the pandemic, problems with quarantine, problems with vaccination. We have a Prime Minister who has this tendency to keep everything secret. I mean, this is a really good example. The fact that the French found out 1 hour before the announcement was made, and yet the day before or on the day, the French received a letter from Australia saying we're totally committed to this submarine program, and 2 weeks earlier our foreign minister and our defence minister met with their equivalents in France via a video call.
Yeah.
Now, if those two weren't in the picture, this is really bad. If our defence minister and our foreign minister didn't know anything, oh yeah, they did. And they were giving verbal assurances that we're totally committed to this submarine program. This is an exceptionally bad look for this government. But it also gives Scott Morrison the chance to beat the drums of war as he goes into an election that he's terrified that he could lose.
Right.
And I think at the moment, the other thing I think is really important is both Boris Johnson and, more importantly, Joe Biden have been desperate to get Scott Morrison to the climate change table. And I think this might be just the little wedge they need to open that gap and get him to start focusing. Because it's really easy for them to turn around and say, sorry, if you don't have a net zero by 2050 policy, you don't get submarines by 2070.
When you earn your degree online at Arizona State University, you get everything the nation's most innovative university has to offer. The same internationally recognized faculty, the same nationally ranked programs, the same degree. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
I guess what I find so frustrating is the whole idea of submarines is neither here nor there. I mean, is it a necessity? I don't even know if it really is. We kind of have been somewhat talking about it with the French. But this whole idea that we must now protect ourselves from China, which essentially is what this is about. It's about China, if we're going to be honest about it.
There is a good point where you say, they're neither here nor there. And again, through reading a lot of stuff and also getting people sending me stuff via Twitter, thanks, @iSpy Podcast, if you have anything to say. What happened was, one person summed it up brilliantly. The modern submarine is the apex predator in the ocean for navies. It was the battleship. For a long time, it was the big battleships, right? They could just fire those huge guns and blow each other out of the water. And then, of course, after the Battle of Midway in World War II, it was air power. So it became the flat tops. It became the aircraft carriers. Now, aircraft carriers... It's really, really hard to spot submarines now. They're exceptionally quiet. They're very, 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 very quiet. And, you're literally looking for a hole in an ocean. And that is a submarine. I mean, this is a great story. Again, not a lot of people talk about this, but I think it was in 2008, and a French nuclear submarine and a British nuclear submarine ran into each other in the Atlantic because they didn't know each other was there. Right. They literally had a head on. A, how difficult is that to do, considering the size of the ocean? But B, the fact that it happened shows just how stealthy these things are. And another thing to remember is they're exceptionally expensive. They're more expensive than anything else we can build, simply because it's essentially a spaceship for the planet. Because once you get below, 30, 40 metres, if you don't have some sort of pressurised suit around you, you're dead. So if you're going to drop to 200 metres in a tin can, that tin can has to be exceptionally sophisticated.
So once we have these submarines, alleged submarines, if we ever get them, what the fuck are we doing with them? Are we just cruising around? I don't understand what the point of them is.
Well, we'd no doubt probably have regular patrols and regular sorties into the South China Sea. That's obviously going to happen, all right?
Yeah, and that'll piss off China even more.
Yeah, well, that seems to be the thing we do these days. And to me, it's frustrating because there are better ways to do this.
I agree.
But the other thing is, and this is a really important, here's a couple of great facts for you.
Okay.
Who has the largest submarine fleet in the world?
China.
No.
Russia.
No.
Don't know.
North Korea.
Oh, right. That makes sense. Yep.
They have 83 submarines. Now, they're all conventional. Now, the Chinese have 59, I think, conventional diesel electrics, and I think it's either 6 or 9 nuclear submarines.
See, we're never going to have as many subs as them.
Well, put it this way, China turns out one sub a year. So in the time it takes for us to build
years.
12...
20 years probably.
Well, it's just to get one is going to be at least 20. At least 20, right?
God.
By the time we get to the point where we've got 12 in the water, the Chinese are probably going to have 150, 200. Because if they're churning out one a year, it's not going to be that hard for them to up production and start churning out two. And
exactly.
I mean, that's the really sad thing is all of that steel came from here. All the steel they used to build. There was a great moment. I remember the Chinese. I've got the photo. I can remember I was on the ferry and I was, going into town and I saw this Chinese ship in the harbour. It just showed up in Sydney Harbour one day. No one knew it was coming. It just popped in and I just remember looking at it going, oh, China is showing us what they've been doing with Australian steel. So the thing is, the problem we have is America desperately wants to hold on to its hegemony. It wants to hold on to its power. And China is in its ascendance. We have an exceptionally, I would say, hawkish president within China in Xi Jinping, and he's basically saying, we're the brightest and the best and come at us. And essentially, Australia is the meat in the sandwich. One other thing we need to remember, and this is another point that everyone forgets, is Scott Morrison talks about how this has been a plan 18 months in the hatching. That means this plan started with guess who?
How many prime ministers have we had? I don't know.
It's got nothing. No, it's Scott Morrison, 18 months. This started with Trump. This was a deal that started with Trump, right?
But has it been 18 months in the making? But from what I read, a lot of people, a lot of commentators have said that this could never have happened with Trump, this deal.
According to what Morrison has said, he's been working on this plan for 18 months. That's what he said. This is from Morrison.
Did he work on it in his head and didn't tell anyone?
Who knows? I mean, because, he doesn't hold a hose and he doesn't hold a pen. And he doesn't hold a promise.
I know that you have your issues with Scott Morrison, so we don't need to go down this whole left-leaning way of looking at the world. But, there's so many holes in this whole thing that I think you could park a massive ship in it. You don't even need a sub. There's just so many holes in this whole thing. And I fail to understand it. I fail to understand it from a foreign policy perspective. I fail to understand it from, a foreign economic perspective. And I fail to understand it from, a protective perspective, because the whole thing is we're going to be protecting our backyard, but from who, from what? In my mind, we're creating the drama. The drama's not there. We are creating it.
There's that lovely sketch that scene from Utopia where essentially Rob Sitch goes, hang on, we're building up our defence to defend ourselves, to protect our trade with China from China.
Yeah, exactly. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense what's going on. And look, you're not alone. Interestingly enough, I've read so much analysis and everybody comes back to the point of what's the point? All right.
Because China doesn't need to use military might to take our land. They're pretty much here to I don't know. They have everything they need from our land as well in terms of steel and stuff. So I don't know what it is that they think we need to protect China from in a military perspective, because economically they already have us. They already have us.
Well, that's the problem we've got is they've stopped buying our barley, they've stopped buying our coal, they've stopped buying our wine, they've stopped buying our lobsters.
Because we were rude. We were very, very rude.
We were rude. And we probably made Winnie the Pooh jokes at the wrong time. The big problem we have now is if something does happen, if in the next 5-10 years, God help us if it does, if it goes from being a Cold War to a hot war, and this is what a lot of people are talking about right now, is the fact that it's essentially establishing a Cold War in the Western Pacific. And interestingly enough, when you look at America and its military-industrial complex, it's virtually a jobs program. I mean, when we talk about we're going to get these great new these great new submarines, let's look at the F-35. We still don't have them on. We've got them, but we can't use them yet because the software doesn't work. Right. Now, any new platform will have problems. Anyone who's bought an iPhone knows that. But if we are constantly buying military equipment, and it's not cheap.
No.
one of the other points that has been made, and it's really interesting, is because of the problems with American and UK maintenance of their submarines, it's almost like Australia is going to be paying to upgrade their shipyards so they can be built. Right?
Yes, they are. So, they're going to have to spend an awful amount on infrastructure to support all of this.
Yeah. And we don't have the infrastructure in place to support it ourselves. So again, now infrastructure is not a bad thing. We like spending money on infrastructure. It creates jobs, which helps the economy along. But if we're creating infrastructure for stuff that doesn't exist and may never exist, that's what I really find is quite strange about this is it's like, what's the end game?
Yep. So now we've pissed off the French and now we need to talk through why that's bad.
So one of the big problems we've got right now is we are seeking a free trade agreement from the European Union.
Yeah,
that's great. We need free trade. We can't sell our barley to China at the moment, so we could sell it to France. That'd be cool. Or the European Union. The only problem being the European Union used to be headed by Angela Merkel from Germany.
Right.
Great leader. She's now left. She's retired. And good work. She's done some great stuff. And she handed the reins of the EU to Emmanuel Macron, the French president.
Yeah, not going to bode well, is it?
Yeah, Dan Tehan, our trade minister, is going to have a fairly rough time in Paris, I think. So this is the problem we have. We have a problem with free trade. We have a problem getting working on a trade agreement with Europe. The other thing we have is our nearest neighbour, Indonesia, has suddenly gone, you're buying what now?
Yeah, so and we haven't really spoken about that, about the Indonesia part of this, because all of a sudden they feel very left out of the conversation, which, you know, quite frankly, they are. And they're a little bit stressed that we're going to have these submarines going on in their backyard.
Exactly. We're going to have these nuclear submarines sitting offshore. And the thing is, one of the things about Australian submarines is they've got to be able to operate in shallow tropical waters, right? i.e., around Indonesia and the top end of Australia. So, again, this is a massive threat towards Indonesia. Malaysia is not happy about it. Japan has just looked at the French and gone, sucko, guys, they did it to us as well. Because don't forget, we were going to buy Japanese subs, but then that was Tony Abbott's idea. And then, of course, Malcolm Turnbull went, no, let's go European. It's more sophisticated. And this is the thing we've got, is now we sit with 6 submarines that maybe we can fix. We do have the ability. We've got engineers that work on it, waiting for new submarines that no one knows what they look like, no one knows what they do. And meanwhile, every one of our neighbours, even the New Zealanders, have gone, geez, bro, that's terrible, eh? Right? We're kind of become a pariah. And one thing, it's like that lovely gif of the 2 guys in Nazi uniforms going, do you think we might be the baddies? It's at the moment, we're in a really, really bad position globally.
Yes, and for no real benefit at this stage, I would say.
At the moment, the only person that seems to be benefiting, or probably thinks they're benefiting, is Scott Morrison.